Well, let's just make sure we are technically set up here. We want to make sure we technically are working. Always want to make sure that technically everything is going to work. Because you never know. You never know if it's actually going to work. All right, we're working. Always good to make sure everything is working. And yes, it is working. Okay. We are good. Always good to just check because you never know. Everyone has technical glitches once in a while, and those technical glitches can be the most annoying thing on the planet. So, welcome back to Andersen Acres. If you're new here, glad to meet you. My name is Leanne. We run a small hobby farm in central Canada, and it is bitterly cold today. Like, bitterly cold. Even for, like, it's always cold in September. September is cold because it's Canada on the prairies. And September can be kind of nice, but it can also have some blisteringly cold days. And this week, cold. We're talking getting frost and everything. It's been fun. Last week, we were complaining it was too hot and we were hiding in the shade. This week, it's all about, it's just too hot and it's windy. So if my hair's getting blown all over the place, not much I can do about that. Because really, what can I do? Nothing. Very windy. Right? Very windy. Excellent. So, I'm glad I'm outside, though, because it could be so much worse. So, this is the first Friday of the month. This happens to be September, which is why it's so nasty out. But the first week of the month is where we do our farm talk. And this is about things that are happening on the farm, seasonal things you might expect to be happening on most farms, and just what's going on and what might be going on other places. If you're here live or catching the replay, thanks for showing up. I know a lot of you watch on the replay. Most of you do. I have gotten so many comments from so many people who watch either later Friday or they watch on the weekend, mostly because they can't show up Friday afternoon. That's why I leave the live streams up. That's why I don't take them down. I know most of you are watching them later, and then they just become a video later. Now, because I get a lot of comments about the time of day, I have to be frank. I can't move it. I've had people say Friday's great, but can you do it later in the day? Friday nights are just too busy around here. Between the animals and everything else going on and people being off work and so much happening, I simply don't have time. It's just not possible. So I really appreciate you showing up, whether you're live or watching on the replay. Either way is fine. It doesn't matter. I just like going live once in a while because it's fun. And wow, is it windy. Awesome. It's Shadowfax's having a great hair day. Yeah, you look good, buddy. He's looking good. He hopes I have cookies. I do not. So, this is that time of year where everything speeds up. Okay, last week we talked about how there's never enough time, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Okay, I'm not going to bother going over everything I went over last week, where I talk about fall and how it's, as much as I love the weather and it's my favorite season, it's also the time of year where you're racing against the clock. So instead of doing that, I want to talk about what's been going on this week and this month, what will be going on this month at Andersen Acres. So September, which is the month we're in, means harvest season. It means it's in full swing. Tomatoes are blushing. Peppers are still holding on, but barely. Squashes are starting to pile up. I've got way too much squash. It's that time of year where kitchen counters are never really clear because now I also have potatoes cluttering up the island. We're just basically piling up baskets full of fresh produce. These are either waiting to be eaten fresh or canned or frozen or dehydrated. We have a heck of a lot going on when it comes to the fall harvest. The big chore right now, and for a lot of people, potatoes. We plant a lot of potatoes because we have land out over there that is really, really fertile and great for root crops. So we have a lot of potatoes and carrots and turnips and beets and radishes and things like that. We have a lot of that. Now, digging up potatoes always feels a bit like a treasure hunt and a workout all rolled into one. You really never know what you're going to find under the soil. I think a lot of us have been there where you go to dig up your potatoes and you're like, ugh, that was disappointing. And other years you go and you go, wow, these are huge. So we have already started, and it'll take probably about 2 weeks to finish, getting the potatoes and the other root crops out of the ground. Because sometimes you get a handful and sometimes you just get a whole bucket full. So it takes a little bit of time because sometimes when you're digging them up, you're digging up way more than you thought. And because of that, it just slows you down because you're digging up more. Okay? And while it's satisfying, I won't lie, getting potatoes out of the ground can be a bit of a backbreaker. Especially, so we don't want to use a bunch of equipment because we want every single potato to stay intact. And if you use a bunch of equipment to get them out of the soil, you can actually chop them up pretty good. And some of your potatoes simply won't be intact, and we want them all intact. So we do it manually. And harvesting potatoes is one of those jobs that looks easy in photos, but leaves you sore the next day, especially if your soil, like our soil is pretty well tilled, so they're not that hard to get out. But there are spots where the potatoes are really, really deep and you really got to go after them. And that is a little bit exhausting, but more than exhausting, it's just time consuming. And it's time you don't really have in the fall, but it's still got to be done. So we're doing a lot of that, like a lot of that this week and next week. We'll be doing a lot of getting potatoes out of the ground. We have 12 rows, and the rows, when I'm talking rows, I mean like they're long rows. We're not talking 12 rows of 12 seed potatoes. We're talking 12 rows of all the way down hundreds of feet. So we have quite a lot of potatoes to get up, but that's fine. We love potatoes, and potatoes are not that difficult to store. We basically can store our potatoes for months in the basement if you're not too humid and it's a nice dark place and it's cool. If it's too humid, then it's not going to be fun. Your potatoes are going to either turn to mush or they're going to go to root. You have to keep them temperature controlled and low on the moisture side, but you don't want them so dry that they completely dry out. So it's a balancing act. We also have to get the carrots out of the ground, which we haven't started yet. And I meant to start the beets last night and I didn't. I just didn't. And I did get most of the radishes. And the only reason I got most of the radishes is we don't plant very many radishes because not very many people like them here, like them in our household. So we only grow a little bit. So that the only reason the radishes are already out of the ground is because I don't need that many of them. So I didn't plant that many. That's the only reason. The potatoes and the carrots are another problem entirely. And it'll get done. It just takes forever. I hear one of the cats. And I don't know where they are. Oh, well. Oh, there she is. She's on the deck. It's Jake, our gray and white girl. She's hanging out on the deck, making a bunch of noise for no good reason. I don't have any snacks, honey. She's calling me for snacks, but I didn't bring cat snacks. I didn't bring cookies either, so he can stand there as long as he wants and bring cookies. Okay, so it's not just the garden that's keeping us busy or that keeps anyone busy on a farm. The animals are full of energy now that the cooler weather has set in. We might not love the cooler weather, and in fact, it's so chilly out here, I got a blanket. And I'm trying to keep the blanket pinned down with my thighs because it's very windy out here. But it's so cold that my hands are freeze and I stick them in my pocket or up my sleeve on the other side to keep them warm. The animals, however, they love it. They are so glad that heat of summer, and this was a hot one. I think a lot of people in a lot of areas got stuck under that heat dome. It was unpleasant. Hi, there's a little chicken. There's a little chicken that's hanging out with me. But it was nasty this year with all that heat, and it wasn't just the humans that didn't like it, it was the animals as well. And well, there are a lot of strategies for keeping your animals cool, which we've been over in the past. At some point, there's just not much more you can do other than give them lots of water and shade and hope, because it was hot this year. There was like killer heat this year. It was not fun. So they're really glad that fall has set in so quickly. They're glad to be out of that crazy, crazy heat, because the heat was bad. Let's be honest, the heat was nasty this year. So because it's a lot cooler, Shadowfax, for example, is extra playful lately because it's not so hot and he doesn't feel like he has to spend the whole day lounging in the shade. So he loves that crisp fall air where he can just run around the yard and enjoy himself. In fact, most of the morning he was down our far path just galloping around. He was galloping up and down that path because it was just fun for him. He was enjoying himself. Arwen is still up to her antics. I think she's in the barn right now, but she might not be. She might be in the bush. It depends. I haven't seen her in about 20 minutes. So where exactly she is, I don't know. It doesn't matter. But she's up to her usual antics, sneaking into places where she doesn't belong. The ducks are loving this cooler weather. They are currently making a mess. Wow. Yeah, half the ducks are over there and they've spilled 2 water buckets. And I don't know where they got all those leaves from, but we don't have a ton of leaves fallen yet. We haven't had quite that quick of a fall. There's some leaves, so I don't know where they got all those leaves. They must have collected them themselves. We're not even going to ask. They're ducks, okay? And we have had a lot of rain lately, so the ducks really love the rain. The downside of that is they're always in the way. And when I say that, I mean they'll be like on the driveway in the puddles and you're trying to do stuff in the driveway, like level the driveway, and then won't let you because they're playing in the puddles. Or you're trying to clean up the path so we can get back there easier for fall harvest. And all they want to do is play in the muck because the paths are a little mucky. It's rained a lot in the last 6 weeks. 4 weeks especially. It's just been pouring every other day. It's supposed to pour again tomorrow. Yay. We're tired of rain now. I know at the beginning of the year we complained about forest fires. Now we're tired of rain. We would just like a little bit of rain once in a while, not no rain to the point where we have forest fires and people are getting evacuated, and then all the rain where we're getting flash floods. We don't need that. We need a little bit of rain every week so there's no forest fires and no flash floods. It's just we're not getting what we need. So we are also keeping a close eye on the rabbits. Smeagol's babies are almost a week old. She is our blue Rex rabbit. They're almost a week old and they're doing really well. The other night it was so cold, I did what we called shelving, which is pulling the babies and taking them away from their mom for the night. So put them in a box in the house. Tequila looked after them for the night, brought them back to their mom in the morning because we were getting a lot of frost. And we didn't want to have so much frost that the babies died. So we brought them in the house and brought them back out in the morning. That was just the other night where we're getting a ton of frost. We're also going to have to do that tomorrow night. It's going to get that cold again because it's going to be freakishly cold again. And so we'll pull them again just to make sure nobody dies, and we'll bring them back to their mom in the morning. That's when you shelve the babies. You take them, put them in a box, a safe box, a like nice little nest box, bring them in the house for the night, and then return them to their mom in the morning. When you do get these temperatures that are just frigidly cold at night, it's just safer for the babies at that time of year. Deli, our black doe, is also pretty close to kindling. She has a few scraps of fur in her nest box. So hopefully we will see some babies from her this week or next. I didn't write down the date she and Stump were exposed to a buck, to Silverado. I didn't write down the date we put them in with him. And they were in with him for quite a while. Like they were in with him for, I want to say 3 weeks. So he might not have got them right away, but he definitely got them at some point. So there's going to be the first 3 weeks of September here. They could be due. And I don't remember the exact date I put them in. I don't think it was right at the end of, I don't think it was at the end of July. I think it was later. I think it was sometime through August. So rabbits are pregnant for 31 days. And I didn't write down what day I put them in with him. So I'm not 100% sure of the timing there. I'm just not sure. Right? So I'm just trying to think, but I honestly can't remember and I didn't write it down. So also Libra in the house is getting closer to having her babies. She's probably about 10, 12 days from kindling, so I should have baby lops then. I won't be keeping any of her litter, I don't believe. I'm still torn on whether or not I am going to keep Tinsley's little broken baby. He's very cute, but I don't know that I need another buck. If I am going to get another buck, I don't know that I want that buck to be related to my girls, and he would be related to Tinsley. So I'm not sure if I'm keeping him or not. I'm going to give myself a couple more weeks to make that decision. We've also been dealing with bot flies this fall. If you don't know what a bot fly is, it's a odd looking fly, but it lays eggs on another insect, and then that insect lands on you, and then those eggs hatch, and the larvae want to burrow into your skin and live in there for a few weeks, and then basically eject themselves. And so you can end up with botfly larvae under the skin. So we've had some botfly problem. Everyone in our area has had botfly infestations this year. We've been doing pretty good at keeping them under control and keeping the flies off everyone, but botflies are something we're fighting right now. We are pretty lucky in that I haven't seen a ton of problems with our animals, but I know a lot of people in our area have had significant problems with botflies. So also it's windy enough that I'm not going to be able to keep my hair under control. So we're just going to abandon the notion that I'm going to be able to keep my hair from flying away here. Just going to live with it. So it wouldn't be a real farm or even a hobby farm without a few challenges. The weather has been giving us some trouble. One day it's hot, the next day it's stormy, the next day it's freezing and we're getting frost, and now it's freaking windy. It's just the back and forth really keeps us on our toes. And it's not great for the animals when it goes from being as hot as it was a week ago to as cold as it is now. But we manage. And just the other day, a thunderclap shook the barn so hard that it scared the quail, and the quail were ricocheting off the sides of their pens, which quail sometimes do. Okay? It was like little pinballs in there. That was a huge thunderclap, and it was just pouring. So they were already on edge. So I had to calm them down before they hurt themselves. And that's just one of the things that's going on lately, is the weather is so unpredictable that some of the animals, like the quail, who are a little more flighty, they're just not having it. They're just kind of done. Quail can be a little dramatic, but the quail are kind of done. So, and we have babies in the house hatching because we realized rather late in the season that we didn't really have enough quail. Because what happened was we sold a bunch of quail last year, babies. We didn't really keep any. And then this year I hatched a bunch of quail, but then I sold them all. And then this year, 2 of our quail passed away. And I was like, that's odd. We don't usually lose birds, especially once they're adults. And then I did the math and I realized they were old. And I went, oh no, I didn't keep any babies the last couple years. So none of our adult quail are from this year or last year. And if you're not familiar with quail, they don't live nearly as long as chickens, right? If you get a 3-year-old quail, that's ancient. And we haven't kept any quail in 2 years. So when 2 of the quail passed away, which is not normal, quail are freakishly hardy, right? They are hard to kill once they're adults. When they're babies, they are looking for a way to off themselves, I swear. But when they're adults, they're hardy as can be. And so when we lost 2, I started doing the math, realized our flock is really, really old. So we threw a bunch of eggs in the incubator and kept a bunch. So we have 5 babies in the baby barn, and we have a whole bunch of babies hatching. I think 5 have hatched so far. I think I put 10 eggs in. I think it was 10 eggs. Might have been 8. But so far I've got 5 babies hatched out in there. One of the eggs is not going to hatch, and I know it, but I thought I'd give it a chance to put it in the incubator anyway. But I knew it wasn't going to hatch. Anyway, so that is what's going on here and the kind of nonsense that is happening on the farm. Now we're going to move over into the Q&A section. I have a whole bunch of questions that people submitted both on Facebook and on YouTube through the last week and a half or so. And I've kind of put them together and I can answer them. If you are here live, you can ask a question in the chat. If you're watching this on the replay, just send me a message through Facebook or leave a comment on YouTube and I'll find you. Yes, I am on TikTok a little bit, but I'm really not. I'm hardly ever there, so don't leave a comment there because I won't see it, or I might see it, but it'll be like 3 weeks from now. So, yeah, if you are looking to drop a message and ask me a question that you want included in the live stream, either Facebook or a YouTube comment is the way to do it. I am on both pretty regularly. So let's start going through these questions because I have quite a few, especially when people find out what I'm going to be talking about. Then they start submitting some questions, sometimes related to that topic and sometimes not at all. So I kind of tried to group them together based on what they were about, but I don't think I was that successful. So the first question, I always use Katie's question first because she gives me a lot of questions. So, hi, Katie. I know you're watching this on the replay. I look forward to your next batch of questions. How do you know when potatoes are ready to harvest? Usually you can tell when the plants above the surface start to kind of turn yellow and die off. That's your signal that the tubers have matured under the ground. You don't want to be digging them up too much because that kind of disturbs them and can retard the growth. Now, it is a good idea to test a hill to check the size, but I like to wait until the tops have just mostly died back. I'm not harvesting new potatoes, so you can harvest them fairly young if you want small potatoes, but I like them the larger they get because I use them for like French fries and stuff, and I freeze them that way. So if I'm going to do a bunch of potato dishes that I freeze, I want really big potatoes. So because of that, I like to leave them as long as possible. I wait until the tops have mostly died back or are looking like they're about to die. So that's how I tell. Do ducks still lay eggs in the fall? Apparently I can't read. But do ducks still lay eggs in the fall? Yes, ducks can lay year-round, but you have to remember that some breeds are better at laying through cooler weather. Like the Cayugas are not bad at laying it through the winter. However, you should expect fewer eggs in the winter than you get in the spring. Now, sometimes in the summer they don't want to lay at all because it's so freakishly hot. And in the winter, it's not the cold that does them in, it's the lack of light. Okay, so as the days get shorter, they do lay less. So it's not like that your ducks won't lay at all in the winter. It's that they're just going to lay less. Okay, and they probably will stop laying when they molt. Our ducks have already done their molt, so they're all looking pretty good. And they're over there making a mess right now. So our ducks look pretty good right now, and they are laying. However, your ducks might be in the middle of their molt right now, and then they just won't. Molting takes a lot of energy. Don't expect your ducks to lay if they're molting, and they probably will molt before winter or just at the beginning of winter. What's the best way to store potatoes after the harvest? So I either like to par cook them and freeze them. So like a French fry where you par cook them, let them cool, and then freeze them. Or I like to store them whole, uncut, unpeeled, because it's the best way to store them, in a cool, dark place with really good ventilation and not too much humidity. I like to cure them for about a week first. I do that just by brushing them clean with a brush. You don't wash them. Don't wash them. You want to leave them pretty much intact. But just take a stiff brush and brush the dirt off, and then keep them in a single layer in a dry, shaded spot. Then move them to where you're going to store them. That kind of toughens the skin so that they'll last longer, which is a good thing because we want to preserve them as long as we can. And then after I've cured them, I then move them to bins in the basement. And that's where we store our potatoes, at least when we're storing long term, like when I'm going to pull them all out of the field. We have a lot. Next question is about goats. Do you have to milk your goats year round? Goats typically don't produce milk year-round. In order for your goat to start producing milk, she has to have had a baby. So she has to have kids to start producing milk. And after she has kids, she'll have basically a lactation time. Okay. That wasn't fun. Sorry, I had things popping up on my screen. Don't ask me why we have things popping up on the screen. Don't ask. I don't know why. Okay? Things were just popping up on the screen all over the place, so we got rid of that. So, so your goats, they have babies when you breed them, and then when they have the baby, they will be in milk. And that milk is to feed her baby, yes, but she also will have a lactation cycle, where as long as you're milking her, she'll keep producing milk to a point. Okay, it won't be forever. The production will naturally taper off, even if you're milking her every day. You're not going to be able to breed your goat once and then keep her in milk forever. That's not the way it works. She will have her own lactation cycle. And some of that is kind of based on the breed. So some breeds have a longer lactation cycle than others, but it's also down to the individual goat. You can have a high production breed that is really well known for a longer lactation cycle and still get an individual doe who has a shorter one. It is very individual. So most people like to plan their breeding and milking cycles around what works best for their household and their farm. So it really depends. And you have to remember that a lot of goats only come into season seasonally anyway, meaning you can only breed them in the fall. And so you're going to have spring babies. Some breeds of goat cycle all year long and you can breed them whenever you like. There's a couple of flies driving me absolutely bonkers right now. Just a couple. But, you know, they're here and they're driving me nuts. So, you know, what can you do? Nothing. How do you keep animals comfortable when the weather swings from hot to cold? That is mostly about making sure they have access to adequate shelter and enough water. Because even when it's cold, they need really good access to water. On hot days, shade and water are crucial. And on chilly mornings, having the ability to get out of the wind so they don't freeze is important. Okay. And on those chilly mornings, they'll kind of fluff up their coat to stay warm. So that's when they all look poofy. Same with the birds. They'll floof up their feathers to stay warm. That's why they have feathers and fur, to stay warm. The key is to give your animals a choice. They need to have the ability to get out of the sun, get out of the wind, but also come back outside again. So if your animals have the choice and they can go in and they can come out and they have free access to their food and water, you are less likely to have an actual problem because they can make the choice that's best for them. Their instincts do a pretty good job at keeping them safe in both the heat and the cold and those transition periods, but only if we give them the ability to make those choices. So make sure your animals have the access that they need to their shelter, their food, and their water. Do quails need special care in stormy weather? Well, they don't like thunder and lightning, that's for sure. Ours get pretty spooked by thunder and lightning, but if their enclosure is sturdy and they have areas to hide, quail can handle most weather pretty fine. If their pen is too tall but not tall enough, they have been on occasion known to fly up and hurt themselves. So I either like to have fairly short pens for quail so that if they fly up and they hit the roof, they can just fall back down to the ground and they're fine. Or fairly tall pens like a human can stand up. That way, if they fly up, by the time they hit anything at the top, it's not that big a deal. So I tend to think, you know what? Just give them the space they need, the shelter they need. Quail are hardy creatures. So even we get 40 below here regularly in the winter. Even in 40 below, they handle themselves really, really well. So if you have quail, I wouldn't worry about them too much as long as their enclosure is safe and secure for them. They do need to be able to get in, and you need to be able to keep them dry. Other than that, they can handle most any type of weather without having any ill effects. Our birds are out in 40 below and they'll be sitting out in the run part, and they only go up into the house when it's really, really nasty and windy. So quail are hardy creatures. I do recommend them on farms and homesteads. They are easy to keep. What do you do with all the tomatoes you've been pulling off the vine? Yes, I've been pulling tomatoes off the vine every single day in the farm vlogs. It can get a little overwhelming when your tomatoes are all blushing, because you can end up, like, we're going to end up with hundreds of potatoes at a time. What we do is we make tomato sauce. We like to make our own pizza sauce and our own pasta sauce. So pretty much every couple of days, we have huge batches of sauce going in the kitchen. So just last night, we made another big batch of pizza sauce because we don't like buying it. And we make the pizza sauce, and then we actually freeze it. I don't really like canning sauce, tomato sauce. I don't like tomato sauce after it's been canned. Its flavor changes a little bit. I don't like it. So I prefer to freeze my tomato sauce in the deep freeze. So that's what we do. Nothing goes to waste. No tomato goes to waste. If the tomato's questionable, it gets fed to the animals. So we don't waste tomatoes around here. We have plenty of tomatoes, but every one of them gets used. How do you tell if a rabbit is close to kindling? Well, ideally, you will remember to write down the date she was exposed to a boy, which I obviously didn't do. I obviously forgot to write down the particular date and time of when I put her in with Silverado, because I don't remember. I didn't write it down. So first of all, write it down. So once you have written that down, you can count out the days. Rabbits tend to kindle on day 31. Right around day 28, you want to start paying attention. Just see what's going on. You might notice that she'll spend more time in the nest box. So you'll give her nest box around day 28, and at first she might ignore it. And then after a couple days, she might start spending a lot of time in there. And you might notice that she's generally restless, like she's kind of biting at her sides a little bit, or flipping over a lot, or, I can't get comfortable, or kind of like a human woman when she's getting ready to have a baby. You just can't get comfortable. I've had a couple of kids, so you can't get comfortable. So watch for that. Some does hide it really well until the last moment, but at some point they'll start pulling out their own fur from under their chin or from their sides or even from their belly, and they'll make a little nest. That's normal behavior. If you see your pregnant rabbit pulling out her fur, that's completely normal behavior. She's supposed to do that. Okay? She's supposed to do that. So if you see a rabbit pulling out her own fur and you know she's been bred to a buck, there's nothing wrong with her. She's just getting ready to have babies. And to have those babies, she feels the need to make them a really nice nest. So make sure she has some bedding materials. You can use straw. We use fleece blankets and paper bedding. And she can make a nice little nest, and she'll line it with her fur. And once they're born, she'll cover them with her fur because they're born without any fur. So she keeps them warm. Just know that if she's acting odd in those last few days, it's completely normal. She might make a nest. She might tear that nest apart, and then she might make a new one. Gemini specifically. Oh, there goes a plane. Sorry. Gemini specifically will build nests in different spots and then destroy them and build a new one as she decides where she'd like to kindle. She has free run of the house, and she's usually in my room. So she'll make a nest under the bookshelf, and then she'll make a nest beside the bed and make a nest in the closet, and then she'll destroy them and pick the one she wants to use. So your rabbit might have little quirks that you start to pick up on when you breed her. Otherwise, just watch for her building a nest, hanging out in the nest box, being really uncomfortable towards the end of her pregnancy. And remember, a rabbit is pregnant for 31 days. What's your trick for keeping squash from taking over the garden? I don't really have one. It is going to take over. I give them a lot of space from the start, and I try to direct their vines to where I want the squash to grow, because I like to use a nice round planter. So I use old tires to plant my squash, fill them up with dirt, and I like using them because then I can direct the vines to grow out and onto the grass, so they're not growing in dirt, because one, I don't want my squash sitting in the dirt all the time, but also because it grows nicer on the grass, less likely to rot. It lets me really see them, and it looks really festive. So that's how I usually have my squash growing. So I've got squash and even young pumpkins, pumpkins that are almost ready to harvest out all over the grass. That's how I like it. And I find that pruning back their vines so that I don't have as many squash can help with airflow. But it is mostly about planting with their growth in mind. So I like to plant in a central ground planter and let them grow out so that all the squash has enough space. Because sometimes what happens is your squash is too squashed together and not enough room for everybody to grow. Do your animals notice the seasons changing? Yes, they 100% notice the seasons changing. Horses get a lot friskier in the cooler morning. The goats get thicker coats. Chickens, their laying slows down as the days get shorter. They're all very tuned to the natural rhythms of the year. So definitely the animals know winter's coming. Do you ever heat your barns or coops in the fall? No. Even though it gets to 40 below, we do not need to heat our coops. Healthy animals generally don't need artificial heat, and sometimes adding it can be dangerous. I focus on dry bedding and keeping everyone out of the wind and making sure everyone has enough to eat to fuel their internal furnace. The exception I might make is if you have an elderly animal that needs that extra protection in the winter, if they really need a heated stall because they're elderly and they're thinner because as they get older, they might not be able to keep on the weight. Or if I had an animal that was really ill and needed to be protected that winter. But a normal, healthy, hardy animal probably doesn't need it. We get 40 below and we don't need to put heat in the coop and we don't have a bunch of frostbite. We've never lost anyone to the cold, so I don't put any heat in. But I would make an exception for elderly or ill animals because they can't always regulate no matter how much air you keep out of the barn, how dry you keep them, and how much you feed them. You might not be able to keep the weight on them that is necessary for them to get through the winter. So in that case, you might have to throw some heat into a stall to keep them warm. Otherwise, no, I don't. Can you plant anything new in September? Depends where you live. Not here. So we've already had frost. I had to go out and cover the tomatoes so they'd survive. And we're going to have frost again. This time of year, if you live further south than I do, you might be able to plant things like lettuces and kales and spinach, radishes, sometimes garlic. Plant that in September or October to harvest the next year. But generally, where I live, you can't plant in September or October. I know some people can. You can't here. 40 below. We don't plant in this fall. It's going to be 40 below in 2 months from now. It'll be 40 below. We're already getting frost at night. We don't plant in September. Do ducks need a pond when the weather cools? So no, they don't need a pond. They need the ability to wash their faces. Okay, they have to be able to put their entire head into the water. Okay, covering their nose and their eyes. They need to be able to dunk their heads in clean, fresh water, especially when they're eating. They need to basically be able to wash down their food. And a chicken waterer is not good enough. They need to be able to do more than just drink with the tip of their bills. They need to be able to immerse their whole head. It helps them keep their faces clean. It helps them be able to eat, and it helps keep them healthy. So they need that even in the winter. So at least a couple of times a day, you're going to have to provide your ducks with the ability to dunk their head in the water. Even if it's 40 below, they still need that. It is for their health and safety. So yeah, hi. That's one of my little hens. She's so cute. She's a beautiful little girl. And there's a rooster over there. Yeah, that other one's a rooster. I love roosters. So they don't need a pond. They do need to be able to wash their faces. How do you know if a goat is pregnant? Well, the most reliable ways are blood tests and ultrasounds. But you'll probably notice that they're gaining weight. You'll probably notice that their belly is fuller. You'll probably notice some changes in behavior. Remember, goats are pregnant for about 5 months. So it can be a while before you notice any of these things. Also, if you notice, so when you think about a goat, if you stand behind the goat, think the left is lunch, the the right is Rugrats. Okay? Babies develop on the right side of mama. If you're seeing the left side get larger and then collapse, that's just normal digestion. If the right side is slowly getting larger, they're probably pregnant. Also, again, like with rabbits, write down the date she was exposed to the buck. Maybe you'll see the deed happen and you'll know exactly when it happened, but at least write down the date range that she was with the buck so you'll know when to expect the babies. I'm bad at writing things down. Do you rotate crops in your garden? Yes, because it helps prevent soil depletion and pest problems. I try not to plant the exact same thing in the exact same spot year after year. For example, potatoes, tomatoes, and peppers all belong in the nightshade family. So I like to rotate them. And so this year where I planted the tomatoes, next year is going to be beans and peas. And then where the beans and peas were, I'm probably using that for peppers. So I kind of like to rotate things. I just like to not grow the same thing in the exact same spot every year. It seems to help soil quality. Do rabbits like the cooler weather? Yeah. Rabbits much prefer the cooler weather. They hate the heat. Rabbits are highly susceptible to heat stroke. Okay. So make sure your rabbits can absolutely get out of the heat if it's hot out. In the winter, they do so much better. In 40 below, they'll be out playing in the snow, but it gets to just a little bit too hot and you're already worried about heat stroke. So rabbits do so much better in the winter. And for the rabbit's sake, I'm so glad the heat of the summer is past. They'd rather have 40 below. They don't like summer. What's the biggest challenge of harvest season? Timing. It's going to be timing. Everything seems to ripen at once. That's just what happens, right? Everything just is ready to be harvested now, today. So the challenge is managing that workload because you can't get a jump on it. You have to wait until the plants are mature enough to harvest. And some days it feels like you're drowning in produce because they're all over your table and your counters and you've loaded up a couch with tomatoes. We have a chair full of tomatoes right now. Not the whole couch, but we have a chair full of tomatoes. Because where else are we going to put the tomatoes? So it can seem like you're just overwhelmed with produce because you've got to pull it all at once. But it's a good problem to have. It means you're going to have a full pantry this winter. But at the time, it just seems like there's never enough time to get it all done. It's like, oh, good, everything needs to be pulled now. And you're like, okay, I guess that's what I'm doing for the next 3 days. And then you're rushing against the clock because at some point, you're going to get a killing frost that even your root crops aren't going to survive. So you just got to do it. Do chickens keep laying eggs in September? The days get shorter, laying will slow down. Every single fall in every single chicken group on Facebook, right around the end of August and then into September, you have people asking, why are my chickens not laying? Why are they slowing down? Is it the feed? It's not the feed. It's the lack of light. The days are getting shorter. Okay. Some hens are still going to lay, but many are going to start molting and they don't lay when they're molting. And molting, by the way, means they're losing their feathers. So you're going to start to see like feathers everywhere. Our barn is covered in feathers after the ducks molted. I haven't swept it all out yet. So there's feathers everywhere. But you'll also get fewer eggs. It's a seasonal cycle that's completely normal. Okay. So when you notice every single year your chickens slow down laying, it's not the feed. Okay, I promise it's not the feed. It's fall. Winter's coming. They're going to slow down. That's why I like to keep a bunch of new layers every year. They do tend to lay better through the winter because it's their season. So they'll tend to give us a few extra eggs through the winter, which is nice. So, yeah, we have a whole bunch of chickens. Right there. Whole bunch of young chickens hanging out. Because they're cute. Do you sell your extra produce? Yes. At least the produce I'm sure I'm not going to use. So we sell our pumpkins. I don't sell my potatoes. I need them. Potatoes are really good for feeding your family in the winter. So I don't sell those. I do sell squash because I got way too much. I don't sell tomatoes. So it depends on what it is. I'll sell like melons and things in the squash family. I won't sell my peppers, my tomatoes, or my potatoes because I'm going to use them. So it depends what it is. How do you keep your goats from escaping? I don't. That sounds like I don't care if they escape, but Arwen free ranges. Okay, we don't try to keep. I don't care. She doesn't go anywhere. We've never had a goat that runs away because we raised them from very young babies, so I don't worry about it. I don't recommend other people do that. For most people, if you free range your goats, that's the first cue for your goats to take off. But we don't have that issue because we've always hand raised our goats, and we tend to have fainters and pygmies, and they're not nearly as fast. Okay? They're not nearly as fast as some of the other goats. So they tend to stay closer to home. Next question. Do you start preparing for winter in September? I start preparing in August. Winter comes early around here. I live in Canada. Winter comes early. So I start stocking up on the bedding we're going to need. I check their shelters. I check their fencing. I get out into the bush in the areas where I know I'm going to have trouble getting to in the winter and make sure I've checked those areas so I don't have to check them in the winter. I make sure our feed storage is secure. By the time I hit October, I want to be done because we are going to get snow in October. So I start in August because if you don't start in August, you're not going to be done by October. So we're already in full mode here. How do you store squash and pumpkins? For pumpkins, I mostly use them as a puree, so I tend to pre-render the puree. So I bake them, and then I puree them, and then I freeze them because I freeze them in specific amounts, so I know exactly how much. I make a lot of pumpkin pies and a lot of pumpkin bread and a lot of pumpkin muffins. I've also started making pumpkin pancakes because they're delicious. So that I freeze because I just need the puree. For squash, I usually let them cure, kind of like potato, let them dry a little bit to toughen the skins. Then I tend to store them in a cool, dry place with some good airflow. Also in the basement, but not with the potatoes. I store things separate from each other. I don't like putting produce together with produce it doesn't like. So things are separated. Potatoes over here and squash over here and onions at the other side. Onions and potatoes don't mix in storage. They don't mix. Okay, they make each other go bad. Don't put potatoes with your onions for long-term storage. Do you ever let the animals help with garden cleanup? Yeah. I want them in the beds this time of year, the beds that I have already harvested. I want them in those beds. I want them tearing up those weeds. I want them in those beds just because it cuts down on my own personal cleanup. So when the chickens are running around the beds, picking up all the weeds and stuff, good for them. I want them there. It makes it so much easier for me because then I don't have to do it. How do you deal with mud around the farm in the fall? Mud is a way of life in the spring and the fall on the farm. So we do use a lot of sand to try to cut down on the muddiness. So we do use quite a bit of sand for that. And I do try to make sure, Shadowfax, that pen is muddy after it rains. So he spends a lot of time out on the grass. Yeah, our horse free ranges too. Nobody runs away around here. So they can spend most of the day out on the grass. Okay. So we mostly deal with it by making sure the animals aren't in the same spot all the time. The more you can move the animals, and for us, it's just letting them out of the pens, the less mud will be produced. But yeah, mud is a way of life. There is really no perfect solution. Farms are muddy when it's been raining in the spring and the fall. You do the best you can to try to minimize the mud and to try to get out of the mud, but you can't control Mother Nature. And if it's raining like crazy all fall, you're having mud. And animals create mud. What's the best bedding for rabbits in cooler weather? We use paper bedding. They seem to really like it. Some people like straw. I don't like straw because it stinks. I don't like straw. I don't like cleaning it up. Oh, there comes the goat. I didn't see her. But yeah, I like to use paper bedding. And I also give them, oddly enough, giant fleece blankets to have in their house and that they can burrow into and stay warm. You just have to make sure those blankets stay dry. If you are going to use blankets, know that you should be switching those blankets out fairly regularly because they do retain moisture and it can make your animals cold. So if you are going to use blankets, I have multiple blankets, and every day I just change them out before bed so they have a fresh blanket before bedtime. Otherwise, don't bother the chickens. What was the point in that? He's head by the chickens for no good reason. Goat stuff. Yeah, you guys being bothered? Aw, poor chickens. They're just little babies. Leave them alone. Anyway, we use blankets. But again, if you're going to use blankets, pull the blanket every night and give them a fresh one. And then I just wash and dry them. And then they're ready for the next day. So each pen or each area that I need to add blankets to, I have 2 blankets. Do you grow fall flowers as well as vegetables? No. We don't grow fall vegetables either. It is too cold here. So our fall vegetables are actually summer vegetables because we can't plant in the fall. It is just too cold. We've already had a bunch of frost. There's nothing we can do about that. So no, we don't do any fall planting. There's a couple of things still blooming, a couple of flowers still blooming that survived the frost, mostly because they were near the crops that I threw tarps over to keep the frost off. But for the most part, flowers are done now. That's just the way it is. We're getting frost already. So, what's your favorite part of September on the farm? I like the cooler afternoons. I like being able to have a nice fire in our fire pit and not feel like you're roasting alive because it's not hot anymore. I like the color of the trees. Like everything's starting to turn color. I know you still see a lot of green behind us, but over this way, I'm seeing a lot of yellows and oranges and a little bit of red starting on some of the maples. So we are really liking the fall colors. And I do like the harvest. I complain about how difficult the harvest is because it is, but I like it because there's something satisfying about seeing your counters covered in tomatoes, just because you know you're going to be able to preserve that and feed your family. Do you have to change what you feed the animals in the fall? No, but I do change the amount. So I make sure everyone has more hay. They need more hay. The rabbits and the horse and the goat, they just need more hay because it's getting colder and they need to keep their weight up just because it's going to be freakishly cold soon. So I don't change what I feed them. I just change the amount. And if I notice someone's not at the weight I would want them at, if they're a little underweight, they get extra grain or extra feed just to help supplement the calories. Do you plant cover crops? We do. I'm not the cover crop expert, but yes, to help protect the earth and enrich the soil over winter, because of where we live, it's a good idea. But all of those cover crops have to be from our area. Like you can't use something that doesn't naturally grow here because the winter will kill it. So we do, but we have to use very specific types of plants. Do your dogs notice the seasons change? Yes. The Great Pyrenees especially seem more energetic when the weather gets cool. Just like everyone else, they didn't appreciate the heat domes happening. They do grow thicker coats in the fall and are happier patrolling in the cooler weather as opposed to the heat of the summer, because that sucked. Do you get overwhelmed with farm chores during this time of year? Yeah, sometimes. I'll be honest, harvest season is busy and it can feel like there aren't enough hours in the day because there aren't. But I try to take it one task at a time. That doesn't mean you'll never feel overwhelmed. Of course you will, especially when everything has to be done right now because the frost is coming. So, yes, it can be overwhelming sometimes, but if you make yourself a list and you go kind of one step at a time, just start ticking it off. Just start moving through that list. And you might not get it all done, but if you write the list in order of priority, at least if you don't get to the last couple things, they weren't high on your priority list anyway. So make a list, take it one step at a time. And remember that the reward is a full pantry and happy animals. And that makes the work worthwhile. How do you dry herbs for winter use? I hang them upside down. I have paper clips and clothespins that I use. And I have basically clothesline strung in my house in a cool, dry area that is out of the sun. And I just clip them up. And so you'll have a bunch of herbs hung, labeled I have all my clips are labeled, so I only use this clip for basil, so I know what it is. But you can tell anyway, but I like to keep them labeled in case anyone else is doing it. But as long as the area is cool, dry, and has pretty good airflow and is out of the sun, they're fine. Once they fully dry, you can crumble them up and store them in your spice jars. So I've got that happening right now in the house. I've got a bunch of rain stopped, but I have a bunch of herbs drying. So next question. Do goats still need minerals in the fall? Yep. In fact, they need them more in the fall and winter than they do in the summer. Minerals should be available year round. Seasonal changes don't change the need for proper nutrition. And like Arwen free ranges all the time. In the winter, there's less for her to forage, right? There's less for her to grab. So she might actually need the minerals that she never eats. So in the wintertime, I make double sure that they are available for her all the time. How do you keep water from freezing as the nights get colder? You know, we've tried all the solutions. We've used heated waterers and those heated dog bowls, and we've tried the submersible heaters. And frankly, at 40 below, all of it quits. So what do? We use those rubber feed pans, okay, that you get at the feed store for your horse's grain, those rubber feed pans. We use those for water because we fill them up with water in the morning. When we come out at lunch, turn them over, stomp on them. The ice falls right out, fill them back up. Come out at dinner time, turn them over, stomp, ice falls out. Again at bedtime. They get water 4 times a day. We fill up those feed pans to the top. And since we're out all the time, no matter the weather, you got to come out and look after your animals anyway. Might as well bring a water with you. So because it's so cold, we just drag the water from the house. The house is pretty close to the barnyard, and there's reason for that. It's hauling water over long distances wouldn't be fun. But it's either that or install water in the barn, and then you have to have heat, and then you have to have a tack room, and I don't really want to do that. So the house is right here. It's not that hard to haul water to the barn. So we just bring out buckets. It's not a big deal. Do you get many predators in September? Yeah. Fall is the time of a lot of predators, like coyotes, raccoons, hawks. These guys don't take a season off, and as their natural food sources are less available, they're going to come for your chickens. Sorry. So the dogs are more on duty than ever. That's why we have livestock guardian dogs. The livestock guardian dogs are how I can free range all these guys and nobody gets eaten. Okay? Because we live where there are bears and there are coyotes and there are foxes, the occasional wolf, the occasional lynx, or every once in a while there will even be a puma. This happens, right? Pumas are mountain lions. So we get that kind of stuff. And the only reliable way I've found to keep the predators out is the dogs, the livestock guardian dogs. We live in bear country. So when it comes to bears, nothing works. Your coop is not bear proof, I promise you. Electric, hit and miss for bears. Sorry, there's a fly on the camera. But electric is hit and miss for bears. The bears around here don't care. You can have electric if you want, but they don't care. The bigger bears can get in your house if they want to. So there's no such thing as a bear-proof coop. So we use our livestock guardian dogs, and we haven't had a problem since they were old enough to defend the flock. So that is generally what we rely on, is our dogs, and they haven't let us down yet. Next page. Can you save seeds from your garden this month? You can save seeds from your tomatoes and your beans and your peppers and maybe your cucumbers. Let the plant fully ripen. So you can't pick your squash early if you want seeds out of your squash to mature next year and produce more plants. Okay. So I know some people like to harvest their stuff early, but take a bean, for example. If you want green beans, you harvest them before the beans on the inside, before the seeds on the inside are ready to become seeds that could turn into a plant. So you have to let them mature and then collect them for the seeds. But yeah, you can do that. Do we? It depends. It depends on the plant. Some of them, yes, like my heirloom varieties, my heirloom tomatoes, I preserve my own seeds. But some of them, I don't care that much. I'll just get new seed packets next year. So it depends. Do rabbits shed more in the fall? They do go through a heavy molt in the fall because they are going to now have their winter coat. Rexes do it less. I mean, yes, our Rexes are molting. You can especially see it on Bonnie and you can see it on Stump because you can actually see the color change in them. But yeah, they'll molt, but Rexes molt less just because they have less fur. But yeah, they'll molt in the fall and they'll put on their winter coat. How do you balance farm chores with everything else in September? Make a list. That's literally, you got to prioritize. You've got to make a list, prioritize. Some days the house isn't clean because you just ran out of time. And mopping the floor in the kitchen, it was on the list and you just didn't get to it. Okay? That'll have to be on the list for tomorrow because some days you just can't. You can't do it all. So I make lists and I tackle the most urgent chores and work down from there. And the stuff at the bottom, if I can't get to it, it gets shifted to the next day and the next day until I do eventually get there. You'll eventually get there. You just got to keep chipping away at that list, right? And eventually that list gets smaller. And as that list gets smaller, you'll catch up. What's your least favorite chore this season? Digging root vegetables. I don't like doing it. I do not like digging potatoes and carrots and turnips. It's rewarding, but it's tough on the body. So that's my least favorite. The results are worth it. Still my least favorite. I'll keep doing it. I will keep planting my root vegetables and harvesting them every fall. But it's not my favorite activity. Do you celebrate the harvest season in any special way? I guess you could say I do, even if it's just in the, you make a meal out of the produce you produced, the stuff you produced, your own eggs, your own vegetables, your own fruit. Yeah, I mean, that could be considered a celebration. Sometimes I'll bake up a pumpkin bread or make a big pot of soup for my son with garden vegetables. It's a way of pausing to be grateful for the work and the bounty. So yeah, do I celebrate? Yeah, when I cook with the stuff we grew. I do like cooking with the stuff we grew. It does matter to me. It doesn't matter to everyone. Some people are perfectly happy to go to the grocery store and buy their stuff. And we do that when we run out. But there's something really satisfying. Oh, the ducks are coming. Hi. Did you guys finish making a mess over there? Now you're going to come over here? All right. Ducks. But, yeah, it's satisfying growing the stuff yourself, processing it yourself, turning it into whatever you like, soup or tomato sauce, or maybe you like to bake with it and turn it into cookies and muffins. However you like to process it, it's worth it. Anyway, I gotta go because Fridays are busy and it's after 3 p.m. my time. So I gotta go. That is literally about it for me here today at Andersen Acres. If you're watching it on the replay, let me know in the comments what part of harvest season is your favorite. Or if you've ever had to harvest potatoes on your own and how you enjoyed it. I love hearing your stories. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you tomorrow. Let's shift the camera. The ducks are over there. The ducks are over there by the pink coop making their own form of mess. Because, ducks, man. Ducks are a problem. And we love them anyway.